do 1 day a week for ALLi. So I started doing that because there were various opportunities that I wanted to be included in and that were occasionally banned to me because I was an indie author. And so I started writing stroppy letters about that, going, excuse me, why are we not allowed in? And then I would CC ALLi. And in the end, ALLi said, would you like to come in-house and write some of the stroppy letters? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So I do 1 day a week with them on their campaigns, really kind of supporting indie authors, but also all authors, really, because I just think all authors should be well informed on their publishing choices, whatever those publishing choices then go on to be. So let's have a go. Let's get started. So ALLi, in case you haven't come across us before, is the Alliance of Independent Authors, and essentially a writing association or organization, if you like, focused on self-publishing, authors who are self-publishing, and particularly looking at the excellence and the ethics of self-publishing. That's kind of a very fast summary. So we do a lot of trying to empowering self-published authors by doing things like having contract advice when they do have contracts, looking at author forums, things like, for example, making sure that they're not going to be scammed when they choose self-publishing services. So we make sure that we have like a vetted directory of service providers so that you can choose someone that you know we've gone and looked at and made sure are good quality. Lots of advice, tons and tons of advice. A lot of it is free to members or non-members. So do go and avail yourself of that. There's loads of blogs and podcasts and everything. I can't even go through it all. So the Self-Publishing Advice Center is like an arm of ALLi, and we do tons of advice on there. Monitoring the whole self-publishing sector and the publishing industry generally, and trying to understand what's happening out there, what's coming up over the horizon, making sure that there's good quality information and good quality services available for authors. And then this is the bit I do particularly, campaigning. So making sure that we're not left out of things, not locked out of things, that we contribute our own ideas and our own needs into the industry, and things like trying to make self-publishing accessible to everybody. So recently we did a booklet on how to self-publish entirely for free, because we didn't want finances to be a barrier. So we always say things like, make sure you work with a good cover designer, make sure you have editors come in, that kind of thing. But we know that sometimes can be a barrier, and we didn't want there to be barriers. So things like that, author safety, we did a booklet on. So those sorts of campaigns where we're trying to make sure that we're looking after self-published authors and indeed authors generally. So do go and have a poke around on our website and see what's there available for you, because it's a lot of things are available to members and non-members. So few stats, and I wish this was being done like a month later. Maybe I'll come back and talk to you about stats at some point, because we're putting together something called the Big Indie Author Data Drop, where we're trying to gather together as much data as possible on self-publishing, because there isn't a lot of data, because quite often surveys and statistics and whatever are done very much on the trad publishing, and it's quite difficult to gather data on the self-published side, because, for example, not all self-published authors use ISBN, so you can't track it through that. The ISBN anyway, even if everyone was using it, does not tell you who is self-published and who isn't, so that makes it hard to use. However, there's a few stats, and more is coming, and I'll come back and chat to you about it sometime. But in the meantime, you can self-publish in almost 200 countries, or all over the world, in pretty much any format you can think of. We know that indie authors account for 30 to 34% of all the ebook sales in the English language market. So that was in Publishers Weekly. So quite often it's funny, because people will say, oh, I don't like self-published books. And I think, you might be reading them without realizing. There's a study by Fictionary that found that whilst women write 39% of traditionally published titles, they're writing 67% of self-published titles. And we believe that there's a greater diversity in there. And again, we've literally just done this survey, and it's being analyzed at the moment. We made demographics a huge part of it. And a lot of people are like, why are you doing all these demographics? I'm like, because nobody's asked yet, and we need to find out. And on the whole, because indie authors make up to 70% of commissions from their sales rather than the traditional 5 to 15% royalties, if you're prepared to look at it from a very business-like way and sort of approach your writing as both a creative art and a business side of things, then I think there's a greater opportunity for making a real income from writing. And when I talk about real incomes to people, I'm always saying I really don't like the starving artist in the garret thing. I really dislike that mythology. And I really dislike the, oh, we're going to be a super millionaire. I'm like, where's the ordinary income? That's what we like to be making, really, because that's much more attainable, I think. So a little bit about those stats. One thing that I think is always useful talking about with self-publishing is, what is it that you were trying to achieve with that? So we have different groups. So there are people who are perhaps what you might call a one-book self-publisher. So these are not people who are intending to write for a living or publish tons of books. What they're trying to do is be creative, put something down for posterity, share something and kind of make it into concrete form, their creativity, not just as sort of a concept or an idea or something hidden away in their desk drawer. So, you know, even myself, and I do self-publishing as a career, but I've also done like a family cookbook and a children's picture book for my children, really. I don't, you know, that's not what I focus on in my career. Well, my dad's done a memoir, and these books, I really love them. I think they're really important, and it's fantastic to be able to do print on demand and all these things nowadays, with these things which otherwise would not have been set down so concretely, if you like. So I really like those, but they are a particular group of self-publishers. Then we have kind of indie authors. So they're trying to make a career out of that. They are beginning to think, okay, how can I do this? I can make it more part of a business focus. They would like to build an actual living from it. And then we have a particular a group of members that we have who are authorpreneurs, and the authorpreneurs are already running a successful author business, and they have really developed quite a significant creative and commercial achievements, and they are our top level of author membership. So each of those is valid. Also, there's another group that I come across quite a lot, and they sort of fit into the one book self-publisher, and they are people who want to do a book, something related to their business, to perhaps position themselves as an expert, to use as a communications tool, that kind of thing. Again, they don't want to be a full-time author. They have a business, that's what they're doing, but they find that you could self-publish a book and use that as part of that business communications. And the interesting thing about them is, because they're entrepreneurs already, they have no problem with self-publishing. They totally get self-publishing, and they will do things like you know, that they're accustomed to things happening very quickly. And so they're like, yeah, let's just get this book done. Whereas they're not prepared to wait for the slower route of traditional publishing. So that's always quite interesting to me as well, about how much they're open to that. So all of those routes are totally valid and valuable, but I think they should all be approached with different budgets and different expectations. So I always say to people, you know, if you're just doing the one book, then be realistic about where that book's going to go and how much marketing work you're going to put into it, versus if this is your career, if this is your business, then that's a different approach. That's something that you have to be in it for the long run and take a particularly entrepreneurial approach to it. So let's go through, we divide it into these 7 processes. That's how we look at it, and you can look at it in different ways, but these are the ones we've got. So the first part is you finish your manuscript. Hurrah! It's a big job doing that. And you come on to the editorial moment. And some of the really important things about this is learning to read fresh. So learning to finish that manuscript and then put it away for a bit and then come back to it and be able to read it all in one go, not in little bits as you've been reading it up till then, but just read it all in one go as if it were a full novel or whatever the format is, and see it as a book. And that means being able to put it away for a while. I can only manage to put mine away for about a month, and then I'm too impatient. I met Monica ALLi once, who wrote the wonderful Brick Lane book, and she said she put it away for 3 months. I was like, oh, patience. That is patience. but it helps to get that different look. And while you put it away, one of the really useful things to do is to bring in the beta readers. Now, the beta readers are people who are not professional editors. They can be friends, they can be family, they can be experts in particular things. And the idea with the best ones are people who just read a lot, because then they unconsciously know what works, and preferably in your genre, of course. And what you want them to do is just read it as it's intended to be read, and then come back to you and say, okay, I didn't really understand in chapter 5 what happened there, or I'm sure you described them that way, and then they look like something else. So they'll pick up your mistakes, and they'll pick up things that they don't understand or they didn't feel comfortable with or whatever. You can also have experts as part of this. So because I write historical fiction, I always have a historian read it at this point. And I try to do my research as well as I can, but sometimes they'll come back and go, that's a funny way of describing that. It doesn't really look like that, does it? And you're like, oh, yeah, good point. And you know, someone who does you know, crime procedurals might have a detective who's going to read it. I had a detective read. I did one test kind of crime chapter once, and I gave it to a detective. I was like, you know, just in case I've done something stupid, and they were like, yeah, red pen, red pen, red pen, red pen, like all this procedural stuff I knew nothing about. I was like, yeah, I think I need to go do some research on that. But anyway, the beta readers they're so valuable to you. They're so precious. And I found it takes a while to put together a beta reader team. And this is my top team for you. My top tip for you on this bit is practicality. Go find yourself some beta readers. I have 4 to 5. One of them will always be a historian. The other ones are just reading them as they would read a novel. Some beta readers can tell you what's wrong, but they can't tell you how to fix it. The best ones can also give a description of what they think would fix it, and they're good at it. I have one who can do that. That's how rare they are. And then I have a few who can just read it and tell you that they didn't like such and such, but they don't know how to fix it. And then that's down to you to fix. What I would say with your beta readers is, if they all agree on something and you disagree, just sit with it a little bit longer and just see if they were right. Because if they're agreeing with it, with each other, that there was something not right, it's worth checking. If they disagree and they've all got their own opinion, then it comes down to you, really. But just if they all agree on something, just give it that extra bit of time. And once you've got that feedback from your beta readers, it's a really good opportunity for you to read it fresh, take on board their feedback, add your own feedback in there, and start doing like the next draft, which is going to be a better version. It's not the full editorial yet, but it is starting to take shape, because it's starting to get outside opinion now, not just your opinion. Over time, you do learn your own weaknesses, and you start working on those. What tends to happen is you go, oh, this is my weakness, and you work really hard on it, and then you get quite good at that, and then you're like, oh yeah, there was a second weakness under that one. Now I've got to work really hard on that one. But over time, you get to work on those, and it does make you a better writer. The editing sort of process, if you like, tends to go structural or developmental. And that's where we're looking at big pictures. So we're looking at the way the plot works, the character arcs, the big stuff. We're not looking for typos. We don't care about that right now. We're looking at the big picture. Then what you have is line or copy. So we're looking at now, how are you saying that? And this is about phrasing, tone of voice, the grammar, these sorts of things are starting to be picked up. And then you've got the proofing. And the proofing, by that point, we're just looking for the typos and the odd slip here or there. We are not looking anymore at your character arcs and things. That should all have been taken care of. Editing, especially if you're new to it, can feel like you need a really thick skin, because you're getting feedback on your precious thing that no one has seen until now. But if you think of it, try and think of it as a really bespoke opportunity for you to develop your craft, because you're not just having generic writing advice, you're having advice on this specific piece of work and your kind of writing, not just general show don't tell kind of stuff, which is great, but it's not bespoke to you. And so just try and think of it as a bespoke learning opportunity rather than some sort of criticism, really. Ideally, you would have people who know how to critique without being just flat out rude, you know. I do recommend that you always use an editor if you possibly can. I know it's expensive, but you do learn a lot and it does make your work better. The first time I ever worked with a structural developmental editor was revelatory to me, because I was on my second novel. My first novel was sat in a drawer, and I went back and looked at that first novel, and all of a sudden I was like, oh wow, the whole first chapter has to come out. Oh wow, this has to happen, and that character has to do this thing. And all of a sudden I could see it in a really different way. So it does teach you a lot. And I think over time you learn to self-edit much more. So over time, your editor should be getting cleaner and cleaner work from you, because you are working on your weaknesses. You're getting to be a better writer, and you are self-editing quite well, so that you get to the point where your editor should be getting it and going, you know what, this is pretty good. There's a couple of things here and there. Obviously, there's going to be something, because it's a fresh pair of eyes and they can see from outside. But really, that over time, I think you get to be a better author, and your work will be more polished as you go along. I like to tell people this because it was just really funny to me, was that when I started my PhD in creative writing, so my supervisor had seen my first novel. Now, that novel had been through 2 professional edits. It had been accepted by a literary agent. We'd had close calls on publishers. It was in good shape. And he'd read that and accepted me onto the PhD. And then I brought him in the first piece of work for the new novel, and it was 4,000 words. I literally typed it and handed it over. It was so rough draft. And he went, oh, this is really good. It's very polished. It's better than the other stuff. And I was like, how can it be better than that? That was super polished work. And he's like, because you've been learning, because you're a better writer now. And I was like, oh, okay. I couldn't tell. I can tell now when I look back at like the very first novel, I can tell that, because those 2 were too close together, I couldn't see that I changed the writing, but he could. So it's a really, I think in the days where you feel like, oh, I'm never getting any better at this, it's really useful to go, no, you know what? I'm getting better all the time, whether I realize it or not. I am getting to be a better writer all the time. So start putting together your beta team. That's my top tip for you here. They are precious, precious people. Feed them a lot of chocolate. I regularly send mine chocolate and gifts when I'm like, thank you very much for looking at the manuscript. Have some chocolate for next time. Because they are really good at that first read, that first piece of feedback that you start getting, where you can clean up a lot of stuff before you get onto a professional edit. So that's our first stage. Now, our next stage is the design. And by design, we're talking about the book cover. And people that come on my workshops get really bored of hearing me talk about book covers, because I go on and on and on about it. It's your best marketing tool. It really is. Assuming the book inside is good, then that's the best thing you can do, is put a good cover on it. And people often will put a pretty shoddy cover on, and then they come to me and they're like, right, so what should I spend the marketing budget on? And I'm like, the book cover. Let's go backwards and sort out the book cover. And there's a few interesting things that I think are worth thinking about. One is really always try to work with a professional if you possibly can. And the way I describe this to people is, I've done book covers where I have gone, I want this model on the cover with that background, with this font, with the something else, whatever. And I'll do like a really rough mock-up, like a rubbish mock-up of it. And I'll send that to the designer. And it's a bit like cooking. I don't know if you know what I mean, but when you make like a stew, and you put all the ingredients in, it looks really like, that does not look good. And then when it's been cooking for a while, it looks like it's all meant to be together. And that's what a cover designer does. When it comes back, even if all the elements, you chose all the elements and said how they were supposed to be, now it looks like it's all one thing, not like a kind of thing. And also, you need to think about how you fit into the market. So I do this thing called 10 covers, and actually you should do a few more, like 20 covers or so, but it's the easiest thing in the world to do. Go onto something like Amazon because it makes it easy. You don't even have to go to a bookshop. You can just have a look at, in your category, the closest matches to the book that you're writing. Take 20 covers and put them in front of you, like on a PowerPoint or something, and just sit there and have a look at them. You will see how fast you can start to see what they have in common and how it's supposed to look. Because you need to fit into your category. And the problem is that all authors, and I have done this big style and paid for it quite literally. What I've done is you go, well, I have this, I want it to be yellow and with like a horse, and then there's a magpie in chapter 5, so that really has to be on there. And then also has to have this ring, because the ring's really important to the thing. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't look like your category anymore. That looks like something that you've dreamt up in your mind. The book cover is not for you. The book cover is for the reader who's never come across your book before, and it's supposed to tell them you would like this book. It's like a lot of books you read. And you know that yourself, because when you go into a bookshop or when you're browsing around online, you're going, oh, that looks interesting. Why does it look interesting to you? It looks interesting because you buy books that look like that. And I know, and you know, that there are books that you'll look at and go, nope. And the reason you go, nope, is because you think, I've read books like that. They were terrible, didn't like them. So you already have in your mind what it is you're looking for. And that's the purpose of the cover, is to say, hi, you would like me. You would like me because you have a lot of other books that look like me. And there's no point putting all these things on the cover that are important after you've read the book. Because by the time you've read the book, you already bought it. You're not looking at the cover anymore. You might look back at it and go, oh yeah, look at that. It was the ring from chapter 5. But that's not making you buy it anymore. So it's really important to try and think, it's not for me, it's for the reader. Obviously, you want to like it because it's important and it's your baby, but really try and think, the reader needs this, not me, the reader. And think about things as well, like maps and illustrations. I always think of, probably because I work in historical fiction, but they can add quite a lot to the interior. So if you're wanting to, during your design phase where you're looking at book covers and thinking about how that's going to sell it to the reader, also think about, are there going to be maps or illustrations in there? So one of the things I did, for example, I had a Moroccan series, and I talked about Berber jewelry, and it's very particular. And I thought that a lot of people don't even know what it looks like. And it's so important, and like all the chapter headings are about it, and this woman talks about it and all the rest of it. So I had some beautiful hand-drawn illustrations done of pieces of Berber jewelry, and I just put one at the front of each book. So it was just like a little way of going, come into my world. This is what it looks like. These are the things. And also maps, because a lot of people, you know, countries have changed shapes. They're a completely different layout to what they used to be. And being able to show that to someone often draws them better into the book. And my tip for you on this element of things about practicality is have it made a long time ahead, because you probably already know how the book should look well ahead of bringing it out. And if you have it done like 6 months ahead, that means you can be making business cards. It can go on your website. You can do pre-orders. You can do little teasers where you go, oh, look, book cover reveals and all that. That gives you a lot of time to play with that image. I also find them quite inspirational. I'll be finishing a book and I'll have the cover in front of me going, oh yeah, that's what I'm writing. Oh yeah, look at that. Which is probably just me, but it's a really useful thing to start playing with. And so I really suggest that you have them made well in advance. Same thing goes for the maps and illustrations. You can start showing that to your readers. You can go, look what's coming soon. And it gets people excited. It gets people interested. And people love knowing what's happening behind the scenes. I swear the biggest social media post I ever had, and bear in mind, I go out of my way, I make beautiful book trailers and all sorts. The best social media post I posted was this. I'm going to show you, right? Imagine this, right? But just like pinned on my wall. That's a word count target. It's just a line that goes 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, like that, with the title of the book. And I just took it off like that. And people went nuts for it. And I was like, really? You're excited by that? And I went to all that trouble with beautiful pictures from Morocco and China and whatever. But this is what people like. They like the behind the scenes stuff. So if you can say to them, ooh, I've just commissioned my cover designer. These are the images I sent them. I wonder what's going to come back. This is the map that we're going to have done. Did you know that that's how the map looked? And we're going to put together this map and make this new thing. People love stuff like that. So just start doing it well in advance. And it means you can play with it as you go along. You're very quiet, people. Talk to me. Ask me questions. Production. So production, we've got our manuscript, we've cleaned that all up, and we've got a cover, but now we got to sort out the middle bit, the bit in between. We got to make it look like a book and not like a Word document. So we can do things like formatting. So we can do things like DIY online, and there's lots of things, lots of softwares, Vellum, Atticus, things like that. Or you can use a designer. I'm really lazy and I use a designer because I felt at the point where I'd learned like how to do this and how to do that and how to do the other. I was like, I'm so tired now. I just want someone to do the interior formatting for me. And he did such a lovely job that now I just always hand it over and go, here, you do it. But it's about having that interior looking right for the reader and matching their expectations of what should be in the inside the book when they open it up. You don't want something that kind of confuses them and makes them go, oh, the margins are really weird on this, or oh, that doesn't look how it's supposed to look. You just want something that almost disappears for them, that they don't have to think about it, that it just looks the way they expect and they can get on with the reading experience. Obviously, we have ebooks, which can reflow, and that's a fantastic thing. And we have print on demand. I am so grateful that I live in a time when there's print on demand, because not much before I started, there was the whole, oh, I know, we're going to print 10,000 copies and then we're going to keep it in the basement. And then we're going to take a copy to the post office every time somebody wants something. Nightmare. It's such a nightmare. Now print on demand, I'm like, oh my God, I just click my fingers. Somebody orders one copy and doesn't even go to a warehouse. It just goes into an envelope and goes straight to their house. I'm like, this is just brilliant. So print on demand is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and I love it lots. And audiobooks, which until fairly recently, I don't think the indies had really got in there with the audiobooks, but that's a really growing market. ACX is working really well. Find a way for people to be creating their own audiobooks. Some people are recording their own. Some people are bringing in wonderful narrators. It's very exciting when you work with a narrator and you start hearing them do all the voices and the characters, and you're like, oh, clever. So I've had a lot of fun developing audiobooks for mine. I bring in I've mostly worked with actresses, because I do most of my books are first person present tense, and each book is one woman's story, and so I have each one done by a different woman, so then you've got these different voices happening, and that's been so exciting to have these different actresses take on these roles. And you do the auditions, so you're listening to all these voices and thinking, oh, I never thought of it sounding like that. And sometimes someone will audition for something and you go, no, you're not that character, but you are this other character. Can I borrow you to go and work on that one instead? So that, you know, that's quite an exciting thing. Oh, cool. Hi, Rishmina. So she was talking about, where do you typically find a narrator? So I used ACX, and I found it nice because there was a lot of narrators on there to choose from, and you can either pay them up front, or you can pay a bit and split royalties a bit, or you can do split royalties. And I found as many as I could on ACX. And then at some point I was a bit stuck, because I was like, for my Moroccan series, I really wanted narrators who had Moroccan heritage, so that they could talk and use the language and the words that I was using, and B, I just thought it was a nice thing for them to have that heritage. I just thought it was an extra nice thing to bring to historical fiction. And there weren't really enough narrators on there with that heritage. So I went off and found Middle Eastern, Northern African arts. It's called MENA Arts, where they list tons and tons of actors, dancers, singers, all sorts. And I would find people on there and say, look, I'm auditioning over on ACX. Would you come and audition there if you're interested? And I found a lot of people that way, because that was a sort of interesting experience, because I was working with actresses, so they were really good at the acting part of things, not as accustomed to doing the narration. So the tech was difficult for them, but a lot of them kind of struggled through and found ways of doing it and set up their own little home studios. So they were kind of learning a new skill, and I was learning a new skill with kind of briefing them, and you got to listen to all of it and make sure it's all good quality before you sign it off. It's quite a lot of work, but it is very fun. Couple of books I used a very professional narrator, as in she'd been doing it for years and years, and it was a very different experience. She sent me 9 hours to listen to of perfect quality, not one single mistake of any kind on it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's why you hire professional narrators. So she was wonderful for that, because she had it down to a T. But it was also very cool to work with actresses. So that was a pretty cool way of doing things as well. Oh, and finding designers for cover art. So again, people always go, well, just find yourself a really good quality one. And you're like, yes, but I don't have a list of really good quality ones sit on my desk, otherwise I wouldn't be asking. There's a couple of things you can do. One is, if you really admire certain covers, then have a look inside. It usually does say who the cover designer is somewhere on it, on the back or on the front. So that can be a good source, and you can go find their website and look at that. At ALLi, if you remember, you have access to our vetted services directory, and that has in it vetted cover designers. So then you can go through and go, you know that they're good value, you know that they do a good job. And then it's really about whether you like their style, because their style will be very particular to them. And so then you can see whether they've done work that suits you and that works well for you. So that can be an interesting thing. But it's so cool when you work with someone who's really good cover designer, because they come back with these ideas and you're like, ooh, I would never have thought of that. That's really cool. Scrivener for formatting, yes, I don't personally, but I know that some people do. And yes, it's, if you can spend a bit of time learning a piece of software that will help you formatting, then that is really cool. I think the people, you know, authors who are taking this on for the long term will very frequently spend a bit of time learning that new software. I've been quite lazy about that. But yes, if you can find a piece of software that works for you and just really focus on getting that right, then you'll get better and better at it over time. And Jean is saying that Google and Apple are getting big into AI audiobooks and how they sound for narrating. I mean, I think AI for now probably works better for nonfiction, because you don't mind so much that it's a bit flat. So it's not got the kind of nuances of characterization and all that. You don't need that for nonfiction. So I think that probably works for that. I mean, who knows in time what will come out of that, what kind of changes that will make. It is really interesting though, working with a narrator, because they'll have something about them that reminds you of that character, and that whole process can be really interesting. So who knows where AI is going. I think there's a lot of talk about AI at the moment, and for me, I think it has the potential to be really interesting to work with as a creative, but I also think we are a little bit overestimating where it's at right now. I think it's still in its infancy, really, compared to what it will be like eventually. And so I personally wouldn't rush in too much right now. There's a lot of things that need ironing out, the legalities of it, plagiarism issues, you know, how it's supposed to work, who owns what, where's it getting the source material from. All of these things need ironing out. And, you know, these things arrive very fast, and you have to work out how's it really gonna pan out. But it's one of those fascinating things to watch. my tip in this area is very much try and do multiple formats as quickly as possible. Certainly an ebook and paperback straight away. I know a lot of new authors will be like, oh, I want the paperback. And I'm thinking, yeah, but for fiction, it's about 90% of the sales is going to be ebooks. So, you know, you want to have that. And equally, the other way around, I've had people go, oh, I'm just going to do the ebook. And I think, well, that's a shame because a lot of people enjoy the printed version of it. And why not have multiple formats? It's very easy. Once you've done the files for one, you might as well do the files for the other. Audiobooks does take a little bit longer, but it is worth having those mixed formats available for people. And artists was asking about audiobooks being expensive. Well, yeah, they can be very expensive. I probably couldn't tell you an exact price off the top of my head. If you go and look at something like AX, they'll give you an indicator of how much you can expect to pay for what they call a finished hour. And that means not just the rough version of it, but the actual finished, polished, edited version of it, which is what you actually are going to pay for. And then you can look at what's best for you, whether it's worth narrating your own books and taking the time, whether you've got more time than the money available, and whether you're prepared to learn those new skills. Joanna Penn's done quite a lot on that because she narrates her own non-fiction, I believe, and I think she might have done some of her fiction as well. But for her, that was a learning curve as well. She had to learn how to speak well for it, you know, how you do that. It's not just sitting in front and talking the way we do like this. So yeah, go and have a look on ACX, have a look at the sorts of prices that they talk about, and then see there are different options. The splitting royalties one is an interesting one to start with as well, if you can find people that are interested in that. So that's the production bit. Now, distribution wise is how are we getting our book into the reader's hands, whilst keeping our admin as simple as possible, because I am not going down the post office with copies of books. So some pretty straightforward ways that I normally recommend to people. So I usually say to people, if you're brand new to this, start with Amazon. It has a very easy interface. It's pretty obvious what it is you're doing. And that way you're on a very big platform very easily and quickly. So start with that. Once you're on Amazon, you can choose whether you're going to be exclusive to them with your ebooks or not. And that's a choice that every author makes. If you're going to go wide, what's called going wide, as in you're not going to be exclusive to anybody, then it can be really useful to go to an aggregator. So someone like Drafted Digital, they're basically an umbrella, and you upload to them with your files, and they're going to go out to all the different smaller platforms, of which there are dozens, and they change all the time. And if you had to have an account with every single one of those and a dashboard for every single one of those, I think you would just spend all day looking at your dashboards, and it would be a nightmare. So having that aggregator really makes life a lot simpler for you. So you keep going direct to Amazon because you might as well. Then you've got Drafted Digital, which will helpfully, you know, disperse to everyone else for you. Ingram Spark are doing there for a different purpose, which is to have your paperbacks through, and they then kind of make that catalog, if you like, available to bookshops and libraries. So a lot of people kind of say, I want to be in bookshops. And I say, okay, and which book is coming out of the bookshop in order for your book to take its place on the shelf? There's very finite space, and you have to be realistic about that. And people think, oh, if I was trade published, it would go into a bookshop. And I'm like, yes, it would, for a few months. And again, it would have to be selected ahead of another book. So getting into a bookshop and staying there is for the stone cold classics and the mega blockbusters. That's who's in there. So what you really want to do is educate your readers, because what you get back is people go, well, is it in bookshops? And I say, yeah, you take my name and the title of the book, and your bookshop will order it in for you in a matter of days. It can be very, very quick. And a lot of readers don't know that. They're quite surprised. They're like, oh, right, I didn't know that. So on my website, I always have, here's the sales button, like just click that and you go to Amazon or whichever platform. And then below that, I say, or just take the name and my name into any bookshop and they can order it in for you. And that's just a really quick way of making sure that you can be in any bookshop anywhere in the world for that reader that wants it. So it's a good way of doing it easily. The other thing not to forget, and this is my practical tip for this section, is that you direct sales. So this is where you are selling direct from your own website direct to the reader, because the technology is there for it. So why not? Your very loyal readers will be comfortable doing that. Of course, a brand new reader might not yet be accustomed to that. But I think over time they will get more used to that. There's very much like a creator economy going on where people really like buying direct from the creator. So with craft items, clothing, jewelry, and they're beginning to get used to, oh, and you could do that with books as well. And you're supporting that author more directly. Obviously, you then get a bigger cut of sales. So it becomes then a really interesting tool. And I think more and more authors are going to be using that. So I suspect what's happening at the moment is that the more experienced authors are using it. And what they're doing is they'll bring out a book, they'll contact all their very loyal readers that they have on mailing lists and go buy it direct, maybe for a discount. And then more generally, they'll be on the obvious platforms for discoverability, because not everybody's going to find you on your own little website. But I think that is becoming a bigger and bigger part of things. And also, if you think about things like nonfiction, for example, particularly, you could have like the main book could be on Amazon, say, and then you could have the workbook that goes with it could be available on your website. So then not only are you making an extra sale direct, but you've just brought someone over from Amazon onto your website, got them used to buying direct from you, and now they could be accustomed to that for next time because they've already trusted you because they bought the book and they liked it. So those sorts of ways of beginning to accustom readers to it, I think, will become something quite important in the future. And yes, Draft to Digital have now brought out the print. Whoop whoop. So that's cool as well. So the options get wider all the time, which is good. It's really nice to be able to choose which distribution elements work best for you. What I always think is try and think about the reader's experience, not just your personal experience. So I've met people who go, well, I don't want it to go via Amazon. And I'm like, well, that's fine, but your readers do. And I've met the opposite where people go, well, I can't be bothered with bookshops. And I'm like, yeah, but some of your readers do. So just make it possible for them to find it where they want to find it, because that way you're reaching the most amount of readers possible for yourself. So marketing time. So we've got sorry, Yvette was asking about not being clear on direct sales. So, okay, so what will happen there is once you've sold direct, as you say, the customer will then click on a link and it can take you to different places. So one of the most popular pieces of software being used is BookFunnel, because you can have the files ready there for them to take. So that's for the ebooks. At the moment, it's very much the ebooks that are the easy thing to do. You can have PDFs immediately downloadable from your own website. That's another thing that you can do. You can have the ebooks over on BookFunnel. And there are various places that are now beginning to do print on demand where they'll take the order direct from your website, because it's the same to them where the order comes from. The order can come from Amazon or it can come from your website. So I think people like Lulu are beginning to do that. We can take those orders directly, but I figure in the future, more and more places who do print on demand will also take those direct from your website. It doesn't make any difference to them. They're just getting an order to, can you print this, put it in an envelope and send it to so-and-so. So as long as you've got the software that talks to them in that way, then they can just do that. So marketing, we've now got our book and we've sent it out into the big wide world. And so we need to get some marketing out there. I tend to say to people, there's some things that you should do before you even finish the manuscript. And I think getting those fundamentals in place as quickly as possible is a good idea. So first of all, your website. A lot of people go, well, I've got a Facebook page. You don't need a website. You need a website because the website is your particular place and your home on the internet, no one can take it away from you. We all think that Facebook and Twitter are there forever, but you can see how rocky Twitter got recently. Things can just disappear from one day to the next, and what you think are your followers are not your followers. You've sort of rented them, so you don't own them. You can't get into their inbox. You might, or they might or might not see you, depending on the algorithm of the piece of social media you're using. So actually having your own website is really important, also because as direct sales take off, that's where you're going to be doing that from. So it's a really important place to have that. And part of the reason why experienced authors like direct sales is because they know then they get the actual information on the customer and they'll be able to contact them again. Because I can't email my Amazon customers and go, by the way, there's a new book out. Amazon might or might not send an email out like that on my behalf, but I can't email them once a month and go, hey, how you doing? Did you buy the 4th book in the series? So once they come onto my mailing list, that gets more interesting. And that's what direct sales will help with. Your own author brand. So even simple things like your headshot, I say to people, have a headshot done. People go, oh, it's too fussy and diva-like and expensive and whatever. And I say, no. Have a headshot done and then use the same one everywhere you go, social media, your website, whatever, so that I can find you. The number of times where I go, oh, I've seen the author, I know what their headshot looks like. They got the pink scarf and the sunglasses, and that's what they look like. And then I go onto Twitter and I'm like, I'm going to tag them for this cool thing. And then I'm like, can't find them. There's like 50 of them and they haven't got the same photograph. And I am not going to open 50 different people's profiles and go, oh, that was them, and then tag them. Try and have that consistency of the look so I can find you easily. Your mailing list is really important because, like I said, that's you being able to contact those people frequently and directly, and you know that they want to hear from you because they're welcome to leave the list if they don't. So rather than shouting into the void or the equivalent of cold calling where you're kind of going, it's me again, knock, 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 what you've actually got is people who are engaged and go, oh, you do have a new book out, awesome, let's go buy it, quick, like that, rather than going, sorry, and you are? It's really nice to have a list that you know is full of people who are into you and into your books. Jerry, yes, thank you. Shopify as well. Yep, that's one that people are using as well. So the options, as we say, are proliferating all the time. When you set up a mailing list, have some kind of incentive to join it. And you've probably heard this before, but it's called a reader magnet amongst our community. And so that would basically be, I'm going to give you something of value from my writing world, and you're going to give me your email address. So I do novellas, for example. So my full-length books are sort of 80 to 100K word length, and my novellas like 30K. So with those, I have 2. I have one on Amazon, which is completely free and you don't need to sign up. And it's just, the idea is that it's open to everybody and it doesn't require any commitment. And then I have one on my website, which is, you know, you join my mailing list, you get the novella kind of thing. And with those 2, what I feel is that, okay, now I've made it very easy for you to try my writing. If you like those 2, then the chances are you like all my writing. If you don't like them, then chances are you're not going to like any of my writing. So we can amicably wave each other off and go, not to worry, we weren't a good match anyway. So they can be a really good way of getting the word out there easily about your books and choosing your readers, your ideal readers. Finding your readers is a really useful way of doing it, is to think about who are these people and therefore where would I expect to find them. It's a lot easier if your readers are like you. So I write for myself. I write books that I want to read, and therefore my readers are disturbingly like me. They're basically me, but the best ones are about 10 years older than me because they don't have small children. They have more time to read. So whenever I see them or I see the comments they write or whatever, I'm like, you so like me. It's really funny. But that's good because it means when it comes to marketing, I know where they are. I know what they're doing. I know what they like. And so I can pick things that I would like. And I'm like, this is going to find you as well. So making sure that you find those readers and then pulling them back to you on your website and putting them on your mailing list. So build up that mailing list of yours and have your own website in place. It's really, really important. So Rashmina was wondering about if you're not a full-time author, is it okay to combine your author website as part of your personal website? Yeah, I mean, depends what your personal website's for. If it is then it's, you know, part of you generally, and you go, also I have books, here they are, then I would give them their own little section of that, and have their own pages where you have the books and all the rest of it. Then you could pull that into that together. And generally when people first set up their websites as authors, I always say to them, it's you, the author, the site. It's not the book. It's very common for people to go, oh, my first book's called, you know, The Green Trees, therefore I'm going to have a website called The Green Trees. Like, no, you're going to have a website for your name, and then The Green Tree is going to be on it because you're going to write lots of books. So you don't want to just name it after the first book you write. Yeah, I like doing that, Yvette. The ideal readers are little me's. I think it's quite hard if you write for someone else, if you write for children, or you write for someone that isn't you. That's hard. I take my hat off to those people. I mean, I still think you can spend time and get to know them well and understand who they are, but it's a lot easier when they're little me's. Good. Let me go on to, how am I doing on time? I lose track of time. Oh, we have to go quicker. Okay, promotional time. So we have broader marketing where we're thinking about the basics and the fundamentals putting in place, but then promotion is like individual promotional efforts. So you can think about things like the pricing, which you should do by looking at what's the pricing appropriate to your category, because it will be different. Advertising, I recommend if you're going to do paid advertising, go do some learning about it first. Do not just throw your money at the platform, because you will throw the money away. It's quite hard going and you have to practice. So at the very least, have a bit of guidance going on that. So that's your advertising. Things like promotional sites and newsletters can be really useful, because those newsletters, ahead of you developing your own mailing list, it's like they've got a ready-made mailing list, and you can kind of borrow from that while you build up your own mailing list. So they can be really useful for that. Linda was talking about multiple diverse genres. Yes, people often say, oh, let's have lots of different pen names. And I say, be careful not to have too many, because it makes life really complicated. What I would suggest is that if your pen names can sit side by side, so you have like fantasy, romance, and fantasy, that's fine. You have them both there. You can have different names, but you can have them both on the same site. You can refer to each other, whatever. Obviously, if you write really spicy erotica over here and, you know, incredibly Christian, wholesome romance over here, and the two really don't mix together and you might upset readers, then it's a much better idea to keep those genuinely separate. The best website I've seen was this really cool woman who writes kind of cozy crime on the one side, and on the other side she writes like dark mythological, it's not historical fiction, but kind of mythological stuff. And when you come to her website, she just says, do you want the light side or the dark side? And she just takes you to the two places. I was like, that is genius. I love that. Promotional sites and newsletters. Yes, Sherry's asking about this. So things like Fussy Librarian, Robin Reads, I'm going to forget some of them, Free Booksy, people like that. They have newsletters that go out to hundreds of thousands of readers, and you can pay for a promotional slot in it. And then in a way, you're kind of finding those new readers for yourself, who can then, once they've tried something of yours, will then attach themselves over to you as well, and you can build them up onto your own mailing list. So it's a way of finding readers more quickly. And Deborah's asking about where to find the readers. So again, think about where would you, if they're mini-me's, then you can think about where would I find myself? So, you know, you can think about what kind of other activities might they be interested in, what kinds of other authors might they read, those sorts of things will give you an idea of, well, where can I go and find them, and where could I promote my books and talk about them. I do a thing called 100 moves a month. Now, bear in mind, I do this full time, so, you know, scale it down appropriate to how much time you've got available. But I literally get a spreadsheet and I just go 100 tiny moves. And it can be, today I asked for a book review by blah. Whether or not they gave it to you is irrelevant. Today I asked for a book review by so-and-so, and I made a new Twitter banner showing my lovely new books, and I showed and I commissioned a book cover. That's what I did today. So that's 3 tiny moves. They're little things. They're not things that take up days and days. Then you split it down a bit. And what I found is that if you keep doing that, so every month, 100 moves or scaled appropriately, if you keep doing that, it does move the dial. So just lots of little tiny push, 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 push. It makes a difference. Fussy Librarian, Robin Reads, Free Booksy, and various other ones. Written Word Media have quite a lot of the different ones. Oh, bye, Ardith. I'm sorry, we ran over a little bit. You can finish watching on the video. Last bit. This is where your self-publishing business is very successful, obviously, and you can start looking into licensing rights out that you haven't yet made the most of. So that can be TV, films, translations, audio if you haven't done it yourself yet, hardbacks, merchandise. Be selective. Always be selective. Start thinking about limiting 3 things. The term, as in how long do they have that for? Because it's not, you're not handing it over forever. The territory, so do they have the US? Do they have the UK? Do they have Japan? What is it they've got? And the format. So you don't say to someone, oh yeah, you have the audio and the paperback, if they're not going to do anything with the audio. You go, no, sorry, do you have a plan to do something with the audio? In which case, great. If you don't, then you shouldn't have the audio. I'll keep the audio and I'll do something with it. So make sure that you're limiting those 3 things: the term, the territory, the format. This rights licensing bit is for when you've really built up a very successful standard author business, if you like. So I won't go into that one as much. Always have the contract checked, because someone has to make sure that you're not being scammed and ripped off. Things sneak in there, like they'll go, oh yeah, and then we have all future formats haven't been invented yet, and you're like, no you don't. We'll wait till they've been invented and then we'll discuss what you got. So always have it checked. Things, people who can check it for you are usually writing associations. ALLi can certainly check them for members. I know that the Society of Authors does in the UK. I'm imagining people like the Authors Guild and what have you will check contracts for you. It's really important to have them checked. All right, people, I'm pretty much done, I think. We have vetted services. We have a membership. We do lots of campaign work. And when you see campaigns, that's me. So come visit the website anytime you want. Oh, thanks, Shane, for writing those down. Any questions? I'm happy to sit here as long as you want, but I know you all have busy things to do. So I will sit here and listen to questions, but anyone else, it was lovely to see you.
Awesome. That was fantastic, Melissa. A wealth of information,
Thank you.
Always. And ALLi is fantastic. I've been a member for many years and highly recommend. Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you so much. So does anyone have any kind of last minute questions before? I'm
very happy to sit here and answer questions. I tend to witter on, so I always have to leave extra time at the end. It's because I'm like, I don't want to not say this, and I don't want to not tell them the other thing. So then I just tell them everything.
Yeah, we always want to provide the best value, right?
I know. Need more time. People always go, so could you do like a 1-hour workshop? And I'm like, can I do 3? Because that would be better. I would have more time to say all the things. Bye, guys. Nice seeing you all.
See you later.
Any questions? Feel free to.
Questions?
Yeah, don't be intimidated, Linda. I always say to people, it is a marathon. It is not a sprint. Do not do all the things at once. Sometimes I meet people and they're doing a book launch and it's their first book and they're like, I'm going to do all the things. And I go, wow, why? It's your first book. Just quietly put it out and relax and enjoy it and do it slow. And you know, the big launch is for someone who's spent years doing this stuff, and you know, don't try and do all the things at once. It's too tiring. A little bit at a time. A little bit at a time. It is all possible, Stephanie. It is. A little bit at a time. Otherwise it gets too much. And you have to keep reminding yourself that as you go along. So this past summer, my husband at some point, he's like, remind me when are your holidays again? Because you don't seem to. And I was like, oh yeah, holidays. Good point. I should probably put them in the diary. Elizabeth wanted to ask about advertising. So this would be paid advertising I'm talking about. So where you might book adverts on Facebook or Amazon or wherever else you might want to do it. Those are the two most common ones. BookPub. So because you're paying to be shown to the readers, you have to be careful because the money can just through your hands really quickly. So always start with very small amounts of money. I mean, I'm literally running an advert for like £2.50 a day at the moment because I'm testing something out, and I'm like, I'm not throwing money at it. The ones that I know work, we'll put some money into, but the ones that we're testing just start really tiny. It's really good to spend a bit of time learning about the advertising, what works, what doesn't work. I know that the self-publishing formula people do some pretty good courses on advertising, and it's just nice to have someone kind of hold your hand through it a bit, because there's so many options. It's like, do you want this button or that button? Do you want this one or this one? You're sat there going, I don't know. I don't know what the choices are. And you don't want to test every single thing on the page. You want to test the things that you think might genuinely make a difference. Just always do it very slow. Even when I first started doing Facebook advertising, and I just couldn't afford to put tons of money on the table for it. So I was doing like £5 a day, and I did it for like a week. And then I was like, oh, it works. Okay, good. Well, then next month I'll do it for 2 weeks. And then the month after that, I'll do it for 3 weeks, and that kind of thing. Partly because you are paying up front in advance to then get the money like 2 months later from Amazon. So you have to be careful how you manage your cash flow. With all businesses, doesn't matter whether they're authors or not, there is a cash flow thing where you're going to be careful how much money you're going to put up front before the money's going to come back to you. So you've got to get that cycle moving slowly and carefully. And Christina was asking about how often you should post on social media. I mean, I do that thing every January where I'm like, this year I will post every day without fail on 75 platforms. Watch me go. And then by day 6, I'm like, God, this is boring. I've stopped doing that. I'll just, when I do something, I'll think, would that be interesting? So literally when I stuck up on my wall the word count, I thought, I wonder if they'd like that. And I just took a photo of it and posted it, and they went berserk. And I was like, okay, I won't bother so much in future doing fancy things for you. But, you know, I'm doing a Regency cooking course because that's my next era. And I was like, here's a picture of the soup I made today, people. I'm doing my research for Regency, and people really like that. They like things like that. So I think just when you're doing something, just have a little think about, and would this be interesting, without putting too much pressure on you to be like, every day I must post the thing. And also, I always say to people, pick like 2 social media platforms. I mean, by all means, secure your place on the other platforms with your name and whatever if you want. But you can't do all the platforms. Coca-Cola do all the platforms because they have a room of 30 people who just do the social media. So of course they do all the platforms. You cannot possibly do all the platforms. Do 2 and do them reasonably well. And that will be better, you know, and think about whether you think they actually sell books. I'm not always sure they actually sell books. I think they build a nice community sometimes. I think they raise your visibility a bit. When people look for you, they can find you easily. I'm not sure they really actively sell books. So you usually just have to be careful about how much time you're going to put into that when you could be writing another book, which would be more useful. Angelique, you're very welcome. Shouldn't spend too much on advertising the first book. No, I wouldn't. Because what I do is you have to think about it. So let's say I pay 25p for you to see my books. Now, that's fine, but when you buy that book, I've already lost 25p because that's taken out of my margin, which is fine if you love the book and whatever. But now what I really want is for you to buy the next 3 books in the series, at which point I'm making serious margin on you. And I remember thinking, I write quite slowly. Self-published authors often write quite fast, but I write really slowly because of all the historical research and stuff. And so I remember thinking, if you read one book of mine and you loved it, but then I've got nothing else, you're not going to remember me in a year's time. You're not going to come looking for me in a year's time. But if you read 4 books of mine or 8 books of mine, you will remember me. You'll come back and you'll look for me and you'll be on my mailing list and you'll keep an eye out for me and you'll follow me on Amazon and stuff like that. So I didn't start paid advertising till I had 7 books, 4 in one complete series and 3 in another. I think I could probably have started when there was like a complete series, but I did feel very strongly, if I'm going to push hard on that first one, you're going to read all the books, which they do, by the way. Or people who get really into you, they just read everything really fast, and then they go, I've read all 9 books, when's the next one? And you're like, about a year away, hang on. But at least by then they've got you really embedded in them and they really love you lots, and that's what you're after, really. Because otherwise, if you pay a whole lot of money to advertise the one book and then they drift off again, it's just not really worth it. So as many books as you can get out there, especially in a complete series, before you start paying for advertising. I would just pay for smaller things that are not constant money going out. So like the newsletters, the odd promotional slot here or there, that kind of thing at the beginning as you're building up. Just give yourself that grace period a little bit, I think. And Jean's asking, does ALLi ever offer discounts? Not for the membership. Membership is always what it is. But once you are a member, we have so many discounts on loads and loads of different publishing services. So you should benefit from it pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, just on that, I made my money back in about a couple of months, I think. Yeah, based on all the discounts that I got.
Yeah, well, last year I updated all my covers, and I think I made my ALLi money back 3 times just on updating the covers. So you know, it is worth it, and it's just really nice to have someone in your corner as you're going along. Because especially when you're new to self-publishing, I think people sort of vaguely go, yeah, find a cover designer or find a really good editor, and you're like, I don't know where they are. How am I supposed to know that they're good? And it's awful. I hate it so much when I go on writing forums where there's a lot of new writers and they're like, I got ripped off by this, I got ripped off by that, and I'm just like, oh, please stop giving people your money for nothing. It stresses me. So yeah. Good.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that was fantastic, Melissa.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, great pleasure. Really great.
And awesome. When we get all our lovely stats back, which I hope will be soon, we'll come back and do you a stats talk. That'll be fun.
Oh, great. That'll be fantastic. We'd love to hear that.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Shane, for hosting and looking after us.
You're so welcome. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye.